as we begin this event, I come with great sadness. We learned early this afternoon that Rabbi Baruch Goldstein, our speaker for today, has fallen seriously ill and could not be with us. I'm sure he's resting now, but he's okay, but this was impossible for him to do today. We are all heartbroken to learn this news, heartbroken to know that this good and brave man is ill, and heartbroken because this serves as a reminder that those who experience firsthand Nazi persecution in Europe are growing older. Our opportunity to hear these accounts, to know the survivors, to talk to them, to hear their memories, all these opportunities are becoming rarer and rarer. Yet, today our event moves forward with another member of a Rhode Island community who lived through the early years of Nazi persecution in Germany. She experienced the infamous Kristallnacht, and today she brings to all of us the reminder that we shall remember. We shall never forget those who died during the Holocaust. And she does that still today in very vibrant and important ways. We'll hear later on about that. Briefly, Kristallnacht occurred between November 9th and 10th in 1938, and it was a systematic pogrom or violent attack against the Jews of Germany and parts of Austria, all orchestrated by the Nazi government. Mrs. Oppenheim, Mrs. Ruth Oppenheim, this afternoon will share her story and her family's experience of Kristallnacht and their escape from Germany. But first I want to say a word about what you will hear over this next hour. As you can imagine, what you're about to hear is very difficult, as some of the signs around here talk about doing learning, doing knowledge is a commitment. So also is the process of learning about this most horrific period in modern history. It requires commitment through listening with respect and care. Although Mrs. Oppenheim speaks frequently about these experiences, they are still painful and difficult to recall that her homeland was absolutely intent on the destruction of her family, and her beloved community. Thus, I ask you to take a moment now to turn off all cell phones and other electronic devices and refrain from texting during the talk. Listen, my friends, with commitment. Opportunities to hear these stories firsthand are becoming very rare. Before we welcome Mrs. Oppenheim to Roger Williams, I'm pleased to introduce Vice President for University Advancement, Robert West, who will read the donor for this series. And he will be followed by a few remarks from the president of our Hillel, which is also the co-host for this event, Keys Van Burton.
Thanks for coming. I have a brief role tonight, and that is to thank Larry Soropenko for his generous support from his foundation. Larry, thank you. Stand up and take a bow. Yeah. He's in Washington, D.C. But we do want to recognize Larry, your generosity. Since 2000, the foundation has supported these lectures, and over $30,000 has come to support this activity. So thank you very much.
Hello everyone, thank you again for coming. My name is Kees Van Burton. I'm the president of Hillel here at Roger Williams University. And while Hillel has been a part of the campus community for several years, we've only recently received full club status again. And I'd just like to take a moment to thank everyone who really this semester showed a lot of hard work and commitment to get it back up and running. And of course, our multi-faith chaplain, Reverend Nancy, my wonderful e-board and other Hillel members, Mr. Safarenko, I can't thank you enough for your foundation's support. We'd like to state that Hillel, as a part of the campus community, is committed to increasing both diversity and awareness about different aspects of cultural life on campus. And it is a great honor to have all of you here and to support us as we remember those who lost. Thank you all very much.
You know, I can tell I'm getting old. He knows exactly how to hold this mic, you know, it's like the big boom. Before I say anything else, I see that we're standing in the back. There are seats down here. Please come forward. There are some seats down here. Ignore any reserve signs. We want you to come down and be a part. And if we're running out of seats, students, just come down here with us. We have some seats in the center as well. In addition to Mr. Soforenko's generous gift, this event would not have been possible without the help of Paula Oliveri from the Holocaust Education and Resource Center of Rhode Island, who through their Speakers Bureau helped to make appearances by Holocaust survivors possible through this state. Today, Paula, please stand up. Today, when Paula learned about Rabbi Goldstein at about 1 or 1:30, and we're at, you know, a little after 4:30, that Rabbi Goldstein was ill, Paula went into action and located Mrs. Oppenheim, who is here before us now, all in a matter of about 90 minutes. How can we ever thank you, Paula, and how can we ever thank you, Mrs. Oppenheim? I also want to take a moment to note that further education about the Holocaust will be taking place very soon here on our campus. Rabbi Ben Lefkowitz, an adjunct history professor, will be teaching a course on this topic in the fall, and already it has received great enrollment. Rabbi Ben, thank you. In a minute, you'll get rid of me and we'll hear Mrs. Oppenheim, but I wanted to say that we have a very special birthday surprise for Rabbi Goldstein. Last Monday, a week ago today, he turned 89. And hence you know why we were so eager to plan this event and have him here. And so for his birthday, Nancy Hood, who is a psychological counselor in our wonderful, wonderful counseling service, and also a professional singer in the area, is going to sing something quite special for him. If we can have your patience just a few minutes longer. Nancy, this is for Rabbi Baruch Goldstein. May it not only serve as a great thanksgiving for who he is and what his life is, but also a blessing and prayer for his health.
Thank you. The song I'm going to sing is called Zog Nit Keno. It is, I'll sing the first verse in Yiddish, and then I'll sing it in English, and I'll sing another verse in English. This song was written in commemoration of the uprising of the Jews of the Warsaw Ghetto, but by a Jewish poet in the Vilna Ghetto. And it has become an anthem for the Jewish people all around this world. Sag mir kennmals, du gehst am letzten Weg, schaust Himmelbleien verstehen bleibt Weg, weil kommen wird noch unser ruhig Gedenke schon. Es wird auch heut von unser Trott mehr seinen Tod, weil kommen wird noch unser ruhig Gedenke schon. Es wird auch heut von unser Trott mehr seinen Tod. Never say that there is only death for you, though leaden skies may be concealing days of blue, because the hour we have hungered for is near. Beneath our tread the earth shall tremble, we are here, because the hour we have hungered for is near. Beneath our tread the earth shall tremble, we are here. We'll have the morning sun to set our day aglow, and all our yesterdays shall vanish with the foe. But if the time is long before the sun appears, then let this song go like a signal through the years.
And next year on Rabbi Goldstein's 90th birthday, he will be here. And you, Mrs. Oppenheim, are now an official member of Roger Williams University, and we hope you'll come with him too. I thank you all, and now I turn this mic over to Rabbi Mark Jagelinzer, who is Roger Williams' chaplain for the Jewish community, and he will introduce our speaker and say something about Hashoah.
I want to begin by saying that I wish Rabbi Goldstein a speedy and complete recovery. I've heard Rabbi Goldstein speak several times, and he has a message which needs to be heard. And I hope, too, that next year on his 90th birthday, we can celebrate with him, and he can share with us. But I am delighted this afternoon that Mrs. Oppenheim is with us. Welcome. She has a very, very moving story to share with us as well. And by the grace of God, she is here with us this afternoon. I would just like to share with you for a few moments some background about Kristallnacht, so that you have an idea of what transpired and what Mrs. Oppenheim and her family actually lived through. Kristallnacht means Night of Crystal, and is often referred to as Night of the Broken Glass. The name refers to a wave of violent anti-Jewish pogroms, which took place on November 9th and 10th in the year 1938 throughout Germany, annexed Austria, and in the areas of Czechoslovakia, recently occupied by the Jewish troops, by the Nazi troops. Instigated primarily by Nazi Party officials and members of the SA, commonly known as the Stormtroopers and Hitler Youth, Kristallnacht owes its name to the shards of shattered glass that lined German streets in the wake of the pogroms. Broken glass from the windows of synagogues, homes, and Jewish-owned businesses, plundered and destroyed during the violence. In its aftermath, German officials announced that Kristallnacht had erupted as a spontaneous outburst of the public sentiment in response to the assassination of Ernest von Rath, a German embassy official stationed in Paris, who was murdered by a 17-year-old Polish Jew. And so this was the story that was propagated. Von Rath was shot and died on November 9th, 1938, 2 days after the shooting. Propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels, a chief instigator of the pogrom, intimated that the Nazi old guard had said that world Jewry had conspired to commit the assassination, and announced that the Fuhrer had decided that demonstrations should take place and were prepared, not organized by the party, but rather they were to be done spontaneously, and they were not to be hampered. Goebbels' words appear to have been taken as a command for unleashing the pogroms. After his speech, the assembled regional party leaders issued instructions in their local offices. Violence began to erupt in various parts of the Reich throughout the late evening and the early morning hours of November 9th through 10th. The riots destroyed 267 synagogues throughout Germany, Austria, and Czechoslovakia. SA and Hitler Youth members across the country shattered the shop windows of an estimated 7,500 Jewish-owned commercial establishments and looted their winners. Jewish cemeteries became a particularly object of desecration in many regions. The pogrom proved to be especially destructive in Berlin and Vienna, home to the two largest Jewish communities in the German Reich. Mobs of SA men roamed the streets, attacking Jews in their houses and forcing Jews they encountered to perform acts of public humiliation. Although murder did not figure into the central directives, Kristallnacht claimed the lives of at least 91 Jews between 9 and 10 November. Police records of the period document a high number of rapes and suicides after the violence. In the weeks that followed, the German government promulgated dozens of laws and decrees designed to deprive Jews of their property and their means to make a livelihood. The events of Kristallnacht represented one of the most important turning points in National Socialist anti-Semitic policy. Historians have noted after this pogrom, anti-Jewish policy was concentrated more and more concretely into the hands of the SS. Thus, Kristallnacht figures as an essential turning point in Nazi Germany's persecution of Jews, which culminated in the attempt to annihilate European Jewry. And I hope that this background information will help you as you listen to Mrs. Oppenheim. Thank you.
There are a few people standing in the back. There are some more seating down here. Please feel free to come down. And now Mrs. Oppenheim.
Thank you for all the wonderful introductions. I'm a poor substitute for Rabbi Goldstein and come on short notice, as you heard. Yet our mission is the same. We are a dying generation, and those of us who experienced part of the Holocaust find, though it's still difficult to speak about it, we consider it important, because already there are many who say it never happened. You're meeting someone who experienced part of that Holocaust, and though I was fortunate to escape before the Jews were transported to concentration camps, I feel that it is my duty to tell you about what happened, because it makes, I think, more of an impact to hear someone who actually experienced it. I came to America on one of the last passenger ships crossing the Atlantic during the war. We left on the SS Veendam, a Dutch ship, part of the Holland-America line, sailing from Rotterdam, Holland, on January 24th, 1940. As you know, the war in Europe broke out on September 3rd, 1939. So we sailed under blackout conditions in submarine-infested waters over Southampton, England, to Hoboken, New Jersey. It was a harrowing 2-week trip. We were sick most of the time, partly because we came third class, because passage had to be paid in US dollars. We could not take any German money out of Germany, and my father, who had come before us, had very little money, so we booked the cheapest possible cabin, and my memory of that trip is mainly one of embarrassment and discomfort, leaning over the railing of this ship. But I made it to America and feel very grateful to have escaped. I think I have instilled that gratitude in my children, and still feel, especially in retrospect, that it was a miracle that I was able to get out during the war over Holland. And the Dutch people were very kind to us. We were there for 3 days, and we asked them, aren't you afraid that the Germans will come? And they very confidently said, well, we have our dams. This was in January 1940, and by May 10th, 1940, by that time I was in America, the Germans came via blitzkrieg over Holland, and they had to capitulate very soon. We were concerned about our nice hosts in Holland and how sad they must have been and surprised that Hitler did not need their dams. My older sister and my father left Germany in May and August of 1939, respectively. We knew no one in America who could put up and supply an affidavit for a family of 6. So when the war broke out, soon after my father left, we had very little hope of ever being reunited. My mother, my older sister Anna, and my younger brother and I felt abandoned in a country which hated us and a world that also did not want Jews. During air raids, we were not allowed in public air raid shelters, and we took refuge in our cellar. We had limited ration cards and could only shop for food in designated stores at designated hours. We felt isolated and without hope. But let me give you some background of where I was born, and I hope to have some time to answer your specific questions in areas that are of interest to you, because it's hard in a short time to give you a synopsis of my whole life. I come from a small town in northern Germany of about 20,000 inhabitants. At the time, predominantly Catholic with some Lutherans, and there were 10 Jewish families, of which ours was the only one with children. My family had lived in this small town since 1784 and was well accepted by the Christian neighbors. In northern Germany, we did not feel the full impact of Nazi activities as early as southern Germany, where the Hitler movement started in Nuremberg, Bavaria. If any of you have ever felt like outsiders, you will understand how I felt as the only Jewish child in my class. In Germany, there was no separation of church and state. In elementary school, when students had catechism class, I was sent out into the schoolyard until the teacher called me back. I was shy and felt self-conscious as I returned to the classroom with all eyes upon me. After elementary school, I attended the Hochschule, which was church affiliated. As the Hitler movement became stronger, some of our teachers were uniformed SS men. In particular, my English class was taught by someone in a black SS uniform. I learned little and felt terror-stricken by the black figure looming in front of the classroom with a reed in his hand to use on the fingertips of children who were not well behaved, and also to give the cadence of the English words. Jewish children, which meant in this case my 2 sisters, my brother and I, were only allowed to attend class without participating in any way. We sat in back of the classroom. Other students were not allowed to talk to us, even during recess. Can you imagine how difficult it was? In class, I was often embarrassed when the teacher would berate Jews and talk about the Versailles peace treaty, which was something they blamed on the Jews somehow. You may question why we attended school under those conditions. Often I now wonder also why we did not refuse to subject ourselves to such abuse. My parents always stressed education, and this was our only way of getting an education. I can still hear my father's voice. What you learn, no one can take away from you. This was what life was like before the 9th of November, 1938. Kristallnacht, as you have heard from Maverick. I would now like to tell you what happened that night, which saddens me deeply even now. It was a night of horror that ended my childhood, a turning point in Jewish life in Germany and Austria. I vaguely remember waking up to pounding on our front door. A mob of SA men were shouting, "Out with the Jews," while pounding on our heavy wooden door. We later learned that these men were drunk and had been incited by their leaders to seek revenge of the assassination of Van Raad, as we have learned. My father must have hurriedly dressed. By the time I was fully awake, he was at the front door, assuring the mob that he would come with them if only they would spare his family. They pushed and dragged him down the street with shouts and boasts of imminent revenge as we watched in horror from the upstairs window. Though I have blocked out many experiences since that time, and it's a lifetime ago, that view out of the window, seeing my father, has never left me. He heard sounds downstairs so deafening that I blocked them out. My siblings and I stood upstairs near the staircase, screaming and crying. Somehow our screams deterred the SA from heading upstairs. At that time, they had orders not to take the men and not women and children. Of course, in later years, that changed. Long after the noise and sound of boots had vanished, we huddled together in one bed. We prayed to God to bring our father back alive, and listened for every sound in the stillness that followed. The slightest movement or shadow threw us into panic. Sometime later, we heard a creak at the back door, and then a shuffling up the stairs. This is still very emotional for me. And too frightened to move, and instinctively knowing that there was no escape, we clung to our mother. And when the door opened, it was our father, streaked with blood and hunched over, holding the Torah scroll from our small synagogue. I think most of you may be familiar with the Torah scroll, which is sacred in the Jewish religion. Our father had returned and God had answered our prayers. The Torah scroll, of course, contains the first 5 books of the Hebrew Testament. He urged Mother to take us out of the house and to hide, but it was safer to separate. He assured us that he would be all right and would try to find refuge somewhere. We scurried for coats and shoes in the dark. I don't remember when my father hid the Torah. Fleeing absorbed us completely. We hurried out the back door Each shadow intensified our terror as we scurried past the garden where we often played hide and go seek. Now we feared that the SA were hiding behind trees and bushes. With relief, we reached the heavy gate leading into a narrow back street, where we took refuge behind a few beer barrels. My mother must have decided that it would be more dangerous to flee through the deserted streets than to hide near the house. The night was very cold on that November night. At dawn, a neighbor who was a watchman at the police station told his wife to tell us that we could go back into our house, that the Nazis did not have orders to hurt women and children. So she must have watched us during the night, hiding behind that beer barrel. We stumbled back very wearily into our house, and in what once had been our neat and orderly home, now lamps were smashed, crystal lay shattered among overturned furniture. The contents of drawers and shelves lay scattered everywhere. All our photo albums, books, and mementos had been destroyed. The devastation that confronted us was overwhelming. Later, we received a phone call that our father was in the hospital until he was well enough to be transported to jail. We were fortunate to live in a small town where we were well known. In the cities, the men were sent to concentration camps instead. My father fared better than the other Jewish men in town. One was thrown off a roof, another lost an eye. We were allowed to visit my father in the hospital and later daily in the little jail outside of town, where he was imprisoned in a converted barn owned by a policeman who was somewhat embarrassed about the imprisonment of townspeople whom he had known for a lifetime. Even after my father was released, he never spoke about the 9th of November and what happened that night. It was only later and from others that we heard how the Jewish men had been rounded up on the market square. They were ordered to destroy the Torah as the synagogue was being demolished. My father, first in line as the leader of the Jewish congregation, was too small a congregation to be able to afford a rabbi. He refused in spite of relentless beatings. He would not give in to the shouting mob and destroy what he had always held sacred. The other men followed his lead. There in the market square of the town, where he and his ancestors were born, in front of the townspeople with whom he had shared good times, and others with whom he had fought in World War I in an elite regiment, the beatings continued. The thanks of the Vaterland is what Germany had promised him when he received his Iron Cross for valiant service. This then was the thanks. Why did they eventually relent? Maybe it was because a few called out that Albert had fought in the war for the fatherland. Finally, they let him drag himself away from the market square, weighed down with the heavy Torah parchment scroll. Outer wounds healed in time, but his disillusionment remained. My father managed to rescue the Torah and to bring it to America. He donated it to a New York synagogue. My brother read from that Torah on his bar mitzvah day, and so did my grandson in Falmouth, Massachusetts. The synagogue where once the Jewish families worshipped in Vanna was replaced by a sportswear store selling Levi jeans. The cornerstone of the new building memorializes the synagogue destroyed on Kristallnacht and the Jews who once lived in Berne. No Jews live there now. I have statistics which the rabbi already related of the synagogues that were destroyed and the Jews that were sent to concentration camps. It remains a very painful memory, and I can go into some of the details of how we managed to get out of Germany, but I think I would rather leave it up to your questions to which I'll try to respond.
The whole story gives me tingles, and saddens me so with you. But I hope you all heard at the end of the Torah that your father brought out of your little town. You gave to a synagogue in New York, and your brother read from it for his bat mitzvah, and your grandson read from it for his bat mitzvah in
to the potential in a film.
Yeah. That's a great tribute. Great tribute. Questions? I'll bring this around to you.
I know you and your family escaped. Did any other village people escape, and did you ever reunite with them?
Our family was one of the only family to actually make it to the United States, except for one other man. And we did meet with him once, and we did return to Germany and visited the town. And I went a few years ago with my daughter and family, the grandchildren, and I found a different feeling there after all these years. They were very apologetic and gave me a big welcome. And when I saw the school and the playground where I would stand alone, it was still difficult.
I am curious how you escaped. If you don't mind saying.
Right, as I mentioned, my oldest sister, who was 15 years old at the time, immigrated first because it was easier for a young teenager, a healthy teenager. You did not earn as much money in the United States to leave the country. So she was eager to leave and came over here. And of course, I had to work immediately. And then my father left, and as I mentioned, we were left behind when war broke out. He left in August, war broke out in September, and he made every possible effort to gather enough money for the rest of us, 4 of us. And when finally the American consul, and I have a lot of strong feelings about the consul, but that's a whole other story. When they called us for an appointment, it was at a time when my mother had fallen down a flight of stairs, and her whole head was bandaged. And we knew that she could not go to the American consul in that condition because an uncle of mine had gone before that and it's a story that I've written about and still feel very strongly about. He had had a motorcycle accident and had a stiff knee, and as he came to the console, and he dragged his leg a little, the consul immediately said could not give an affidavit. My uncle jumped over a table to show him how agile he was, but nothing helped. They kept on asking for more and more money. In the end, my uncle was doing forced labor for the Nazis, and his family was killed, and there's a lot of resentment about that. So in turn, we know that going to the American consul, we had to be in top-notch condition, and yet it was under, the time was running out for us, it was war, and yet we had to postpone the appointment. But we did get another appointment. We went to Stuttgart, is where the American consulate was, and they were very aggressive. We were all scared. They throw arithmetic examples at us to check whether we were had our faculties. I was never too good in arithmetic and was scared. They gave us eye examinations. It was a feeling that I felt in America you have to be a perfect human being, otherwise it cannot come. Somehow we were given an exit visa. By that time we knew that the war was an action, that it was dependent on getting passage to the United States, and that we actually managed to do that and come over here. I more and more realized it was miraculous, and as I mentioned in the beginning, I continue to be very grateful, because I strongly feel that one cannot fully, and I speak especially to you young people, I don't know how one can really appreciate a democracy, imperfect though it may be, unless you have lived under a totalitarian government. So that feeling of gratitude is with me.
And of course, you went to the American consulate after Kristallnacht,
Yes.
so the Americans were in full knowledge of what the Nazi government was trying to do to the Jews.
Yes, but it was a time in this country where you had very low border numbers from Germany, and there was a lot of anti-Semitism. No one was eager to have Jews, and it was the Depression yet, in the end of the Depression maybe, but economically the United States was hurting, just like it is now. So I do take it in the context of the time. Yes.
What did your father and your sister do for work when they came?
Yes.
The question was, I'm so sorry, what did your father and sister do for work when they got here?
My sister was put in as a maid, nursemaid, a sleeping nursemaid, and until we came, and then she, found other work. My father had two butcher stores in Germany and a sausage factory. So we all felt that as long as you could use your hands in the United States and you could make a living, and he worked very hard, getting up at 4 in the morning and so on as a butcher. And as I see now, I really feel that we've lived the American dream, because within 2 generations I'm about to attend medical school graduation of my granddaughter. So we came with no money at all, and we worked hard, and feel very proud that we have made it.
I applaud you.
Other questions?
It's been said in America during that time period and even after that, Americans felt strongly towards the Jews, both who came from Europe and who were living in America. Did you face any of that anti-Semitism over in America?
Yes, but I sort of took it for matter of factly as I looked for a job, and there were in the newspapers it would say only Christians need apply. It somehow didn't bother me so much because it was nothing compared to what we had experienced before. As a matter of fact, when I was able to go to school here, and because I had no friendliness of schoolmates in Germany, they couldn't speak to us even, and the American children were very friendly, except it was painful because I didn't understand them, I didn't know English, and there was no ESL at the time, and they learned pretty fast, and so their friendliness I didn't know how to react to, but above all, since my parents were working very hard, my mother worked in a factory, my father, I explained, worked very hard, so the best I could do, being allowed to go to school, I learned enough English, I never lost my accent. I could brag a little, because after 2 years graduating from junior high school, they called me in and said, you're the valedictorian. And the same for high school. I never felt that it was because I was smarter than anyone. I knew I wasn't smarter, but I worked very hard. And since learning had been denied me after Kristallnacht, we were not allowed to go to the school anymore. I have never lost that yearning to learn, and have kept on taking courses and going at night and so on, and really value learning, and I hope I have instilled that in my children too.
How aware of the concentration camps were you at the time that you were going to leave?
It was, of course, the men after Kristallnacht were put into concentration camps, but they were not kept there for any length of time, for a number of weeks, I think at the most a month or so. So when I left in 1940, that was before the people were transported to the concentration camps, the major movement into concentration camps. And in this country, we really during the war did not know what was happening. I have to say that we were considered was illogical enemy aliens and had to report, though we had escaped from Germany, from the Nazis. Here we were considered enemy aliens, but we were better off than the Japanese Americans, who were interned. That was, it's all illogical if you think that, you know, that we were enemy aliens. They were American born and were interned. Yeah. And so
How religious were you, and did that change?
yes, no, it didn't change my, in Germany, since we were the only Jewish children, we were very secure in our religion. Our nursemaid would take us along on the processions to the church. My parents didn't object. We went Easter egg hunting because we knew we were Jewish. There was no ambivalence there at all. And as far as losing my faith, I felt more strongly. As a matter of fact, in this country, if there was anything, I would say I am Jewish, because I felt after being persecuted for being Jewish, I was going to stand up and either be accepted as a Jew or not accepted at all.
Well, I'm Jewish, and it really hits you. Like, I just want to kind of know, you probably already said it, but what was the most horrific thing about the Holocaust to you? What really hit you the most?
I guess that night of seeing my father beaten and things destroyed, and not being able to go to school. The school was no picnic, right? That all was so traumatic that I could not even speak about it for a long time. And not the friends that I had, they were not allowed to speak to us or come and play with us anymore. The whole climate was very devastating, and the more I think about it and write about it, the more I realize that it was a very traumatic childhood. But I also, when I speak to younger students, I often say that even if one has had a traumatic childhood, one can rise above it and can make a good, I've led a very good life. I've been very fortunate and have 2 children and 4 grandchildren and have had a good life. So I think one can pick up and make a success anyway.
Just a quick historical note. We talked about this when you arrived here, but the Jewish community in Germany was in fact among the most assimilated in Europe at the time, which in some ways was a blessing and in some ways was horrific, because the betrayal by the Nazis of the German Jews was so stunning. Some couldn't even believe it. That's why some did not leave. And even after Kristallnacht. And the other thing is, you mentioned that your father actually had fought in World War I and had earned the Iron Cross, which is like our distinguished service, like a silver star for our country. Yeah.
He was in an elite regiment. Where very few were accepted. He was poor, and there was a pride of country there that it was a disillusionment, as I mentioned, that never left him.
Good question, please.
What would you like to see from the younger generation to ensure that we don't forget the horrors of the Holocaust and things that are stunning that don't happen again?
The German generation?
The younger generation here or around the world, just...
Well, that is why I put myself through this. As you can see, it's so emotional for me, which is like 74 years later. It is amazing how deep this all went. People ask, can it happen here? I very strongly feel and hope that it couldn't, because to me it seems the German mentality was following the leader, and I don't see that in the American diversity and gutsiness of most Americans. We had the McCarthy era, which many of you young people may not know about, but some of you do. And we survived that, and there were people who would not go along with it. And I do feel that in the American mentality, there would be enough people who would say, this isn't right, this can't be. At least I'm of that conviction from having that. And I applaud this a more liberal view of accepting diversity and to be aware of what minorities suffer.
Can you take a few more?
Yes, I'm willing. Yes.
Anyone else?
On a happy note, how did you meet your husband?
Yes.
Here, why don't you say it louder?
I said on a happy note, how did you meet your husband?
I lived in the area in New York, Washington Heights, near the George Washington Bridge, where many, it was almost like a German Jewish ghetto, like most immigrants live close to each other, and similar. I met my husband through a temple youth group as he returned. He fought in the Aleutian Islands during the Second World War, and many of my friends met their mates there also. He came from Nuremberg in southern Germany, and I would never have met him had I been in Germany. And we had 48 good years together, and I've been fortunate in that respect.
So he escaped as well?
Well, he came a little earlier, as I said, in southern Germany. First of all, it was, the movement was much stronger, and there were more relatives here, and he came before Kristallnacht, but he certainly experienced a lot of discrimination and attended a Jewish school there. And I should say that after Kristallnacht, when we were not allowed to attend the public schools, the German school, we traveled to the nearest town, which at the time seemed so far away. When I returned, it's half an hour, but we had to take an early train to a Jewish school, and don't remember learning very much because constantly teachers were leaving, students were leaving. It was transitory, but I, for the first time, was together with other Jewish students, which was a good feeling.
Just have a couple of comments on Germany. We were in Munich, and there were 10,000 Jews before the war. There are 10,000 today. They have a vibrant Jewish community, and I guess a lot of the Jews are coming in from Russia.
Mainly from
Russia. And then we were in Frankfurt, and we visited the synagogue in Frankfurt, and that was not bombed during the war. It's humongous. And what they did is they went in and destroyed some of the inside. It's all been rebuilt. It's absolutely beautiful. And the children in Frankfurt, and I don't know if that's true through Germany, have to come in. And there was a group of children that came in. And they were showing them the synagogue and, talking about that. And then when we were in Berlin, we found that I think the Germans are doing a good job, because on almost every corner you go to, there's a memorial for the Jews. The museums are good there, telling the story of the Jews, what they contributed, and also the bad part about the Holocaust. So I think Germany is doing a pretty good job, considering where they came from.
I'm trying very hard. It's a difficult concept to forgive, is a complex concept, and I'm trying very hard. There were certainly some people who were very kind as we returned. Some would say they didn't know it was happening, which, you know, you don't believe. And the ones who were friends of my parents would say, we can't forgive ourselves for not doing more. And yet, those who tried to do something, the punishment was so great that you have to question what would you do in their place. You know, I understand that also. But there is some anger left, and I'm working on it. Yes.
We'll take one or two more questions.
Yes.
I have one question. You got to America. Our State Department is not known to be kind. We had a lot of problems, and young children and kids have read about St. Louis, ships that couldn't come in here, and many things. But you were there reading newspapers during the time you were at war. Did people listen to you?
Well, let me see if I can reiterate that. You said
Our country, you know, as much as this President Roosevelt, he didn't do everything. He refused to bomb the concentration camps, the gas chambers. The State Department wouldn't let any of the police or Jews in. They were, but
so
I'm wondering if these people who came over from Germany before we got involved, was America listening to you at all?
So the question was America listening to Germans who had escaped, Austrians, Czechs who had escaped, so many from Nazi persecution? Did America listen to them?
You have to visualize, I was 12 years old. My parents were working you know, day and night, and going also to school at night to learn German, to learn English, because we were very eager. It was wartime, we were enemy aliens, we were ashamed if our parents spoke German, if anyone knew. We had no power we were happy to get here, to complain to the State Department. It would be unrealistic. We were just happy to be here. We were children going to school, trying to make a living. And as soon as the war was over, we would run. There would be sheets listed of survivors, and, you know, and then we were always terribly worried about the relatives left behind. And yes, the State Department, I still feel very angry about the aunt and uncle who were not able to come. And I don't know anyone in my family or among my friends who ever depended on any charity. In the United States, there were some grassroots movements where people helped each other. And that's what we were mainly afraid of, that we would become a burden to the United States. And I think most of us contributed to the country. So, no, we were not able to protest to the State Department at that time.
One more?
Yes.
Sure.
Thank you again for coming. I was really moved by your story, so thank you for sharing. My question for you is, the amount of fear that you must have lived under while you were in Germany, it must have followed you a bit, I would think, to the States. I'm just curious how long, and if you do, how long it took you to feel actually safe?
Well, I think I felt safe the minute our train came from Cologne, Germany. We went to Holland on a train, and the Nazis were on that train, and we sat there terror-stricken on the cold benches until we passed the border from Germany to Holland, and the Nazis got off that train, and we knew we had passed the border. That was safety. But as far as feeling at ease, I do have stories about going to school here and feeling so self-conscious in German dresses, and I felt very jealous of the American girls in their cardigan sweater sets. I was always conscious of clothes, and then everything was a hurdle for me. If a teacher asked, "What is your name?" which is always the first thing that you learn in any language, that to me was trauma, because my last name was easy, Hyman. You could say that easily. My first name still gives me trouble. There are two letters that were found to me in one syllable. In German, my name is Ruth. I've got a R and a T, Ruth. So if the teacher asked, "What is your name?" then I'd have to say, Ruth. They didn't realize how difficult that was to suddenly say all that in one syllable. So just the thought that the teacher was going to ask my name was already trauma. It seems, very funny now, comical, but the things that bother children in school, but I managed to. There's a certain amount of resiliency in all of us, and I think
I think given us more than we could say. Before you go, I just want to say one thing, and that is about Rhode Island. Mrs. Oppenheim is part of Rhode Island Jewish history here, and we are so grateful. But I also want to say that in Yom HaShoah, in Righteous Among the Nations, in Yad Vashem, there are about 22,000 people who have been inducted to Yad Vashem for saving Jews during the war. There are only 3 Americans in that. Yeah, that's right, there are only 3. And one of them is a Rhode Islander, and her name is Martha Sharp, and she and her husband, wait still, Sharp, yes, that's right. They went into Prague in '39 and into Vichy in '40, and they're credited with saving about 1,500 to 2,000 Jews, getting them out of Europe. So there were righteous among the nations, and we should never forget. And anti-Semitism and hate crimes are right around the corner. And today you have given us insight into places we could not even begin to imagine. Thank you.